out. In your book, you have it laid out in a way that is, in my opinion, very helpful, because you put it together. It's just very succinct. And we've covered so far, the history and what is technocracy, the Trilateral Commission and the history before that, the transforming economics. Let's get into how technocracy can transform government, religion, even law.
Wow. Those are difficult difficult topics for people to get their head around, but let's try it.
Okay. We have one of the smartest audiences in the world, so don't be afraid.
If my theory is correct, and I say that rhetorically, I fully believe that it is correct at this point. But if it's correct, then we should see this transformation process taking place across the whole spectrum of society. Purposely so, not just kind of happenstance, but happening on purpose. We see, for instance, with, let's say, transforming government. Well, it's interesting that back in, right after the Rio de Janeiro conference that produced what we saw with Agenda 21, we saw that that Bill Clinton started, well, let's see, 1992 was the Earth Summit that produced the book. Let me just get my timeline straight here. In March of 93, Clinton and Gore, president and vice president, both members of the Trilateral Commission, by the way, they announced a national partnership for reinventing government. And interesting, I mean, nobody really paid attention. I remember that very day. I had no idea about technocracy even then. I thought, wow, it's reinventing government. Dang. Probably needs to be reinvented, like maybe you serve the people for a change. Well, that wasn't it. That wasn't it at all. A month later, the Agenda 21 book was published. 2 months after that, Clinton signed an executive order called the President's Council on Sustainable Development. He didn't waste any time. Even though it wasn't law in our country, he said, we're doing this, guys. Didn't matter. We're going to do it by executive order. 3 months after that, Clinton signed another executive order called the National Performance Review, Reinventing Government. And the rest is history. This transformed the executive branch of our government, which is, that's what we look when we say the government. It's basically the executive branch, all of the agencies and how they interact with people and stuff like that. That's the government supposed to serve the people. Well, thanks to Bill Clinton and Al Gore, the government was reinvented for the sake of implementing sustainable development. Completely opposite of what the founders of our country intended that government would be. And nobody challenged it back then. They later called anybody who even mentioned the word Agenda 21 a nut. Part of that vast right-wing conspiracy. That's a myth. Whoever heard of that?
In 2009, the Department of Homeland Security released a lexicon listing several different belief systems and ideologies as possible domestic terrorist or extremism, in which one of them was Agenda 21, another one was a Christian identity, another one was the Patriot movement, anti-global warming, and etc. And they do this. This is how they, try to scare people into submission and label those who oppose their agenda.
Yeah. So government was indeed reinvented. And, today people look at the government. Most people have absolutely no clue about this transforming process that took place. But what they do know, what they see on the surface of it, they understand that there's something wrong with the executive branch because the Congress has absolutely no control over it. Absolutely no control. It's like that Congress has been neutered.
They have.
I mean,
they have through the executive branch. The executive branch has allowed each individual agency department head to change the law through the Federal Register without any congressional approval, which is how they've made 40-some thousand changes alone to the Obamacare bill, and how they set new policy without having a vote.
Exactly. So, this is one of the byproducts of the reinvention of government. They have completely isolated Congress to where Congress is thoroughly irrelevant. And I hate to say that. I mean, I'm not bashing Congress. Don't get me wrong. I love the Republican form of government that we're supposed to have, but that's not what we have today. And we have sent some good people to Washington over the last 30 years. You almost want to cry over the whole thing, but we sent some good men and women to Washington occasionally. And they get there, and after they're there about 2 months, it's like, where did they go? What happened to old Bill? What happened to old Mary? And all of a sudden, they've been completely consumed by the system, and they're marching around like good little robots, like the rest of the people around them, completely ineffective at doing what they said they're going to do when they got to Washington, D.C. And these were good people. I am convinced they were good people before they got there. But something happens when you go to Washington. I don't know what it is. You go there and you spend too much time, man. It's like the Borg, on Star Trek. Remember? The Borg. We will assimilate. We will assimilate.
Yeah.
And it's like you get around these people, and all of a sudden, you find yourself changing.
Well, they have extortion,
before you know it,
bribery, in a number of ways to make people comply with their agenda, to wholesale just making something up to ruin a person's name and reputation if they don't play ball.
I know. They have ways to beat you down and beat you up. So at this point, I've been convinced for some time we're not going to change anything. I don't care who we send to Congress. We're not going to. It's not going to change. You can work as hard as you want, send anybody you want, but they're not going to be. It doesn't matter if you're a congressman or senator. You will not change anything. At this point in time, you will not change anything. That's sad. I could almost say the same thing about our national election as well.
No, you're right.
Because
you're exactly right.
even if Trump gets elected, and I expect that he will, quite honestly, just the way I look at the political spectrum, I think he's going to get elected. But Trump's going to get in there, and he's going to have his first cabinet meeting. You can just see how this is going to play out, where all the different secretaries of these agencies come to the table. And even if he appoints brand new ones all the way across the board, they're going to come to the table and they're going to say, this is how things work around here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, unless he's willing just to shut down some of those agencies, which is what Ron Paul wanted to do, by the way, and I think probably that could happen just fine. Just shut them down. Tell them all go home. You're fired. Would that be great? How about just sending HUD home? Oh man, I just can't imagine. How about just dismantling the whole Obamacare nightmare?
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen. That's a nice dream.
It is a nice dream, and you make a good point because people are looking to the presidential, whoever gets elected, well, specifically Trump, as their political savior, and we know there's no political solution to a spiritual problem.